All right, hello and welcome to the Thrive and Prosper series. Today we're talking about the psychology of change. We've got 6 experts, 2 groups of 3 over the next hour. Please join the chat on YouTube or on Twitter, hashtag Thrive and Prosper. That's Thrive, A-N-D, Prosper. We're really excited about today's event, and I'm going to hand over to Nicholas. My name is John Golden from Better CRM and Sales Pop magazine. And Nick, here's Nicholas, CEO of Pipeliner.
So welcome also from my side, or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's amazing. Our last event was really driving. That brought us to the idea to make a whole series, and we renamed it by Thrive and Prosper. That's what it needs. Last time we had already over 14,000 views. I basically believe this will be even more because the topic is really right on. I think, first of all, again, from my side, to all the distinguished speakers, thank you for all participating. We have these unbelievable experts, authors, therapists, pastors, from all angles. We are looking to the psychology of change. It will be fantastic to hear from the panel and what it's going on and what it is. And let me just start why Pipeliner is doing that, why we do that, what drives us. And I want to quote Victor Hugo, who once said, "Nothing is more powerful than the idea whose time has come." Now is the time that has come that the most undereducated, undervalued, underappreciated workforce in the world, sales, gets the greatest importance for the future. Why? Because people have to sell in the pandemic or after the pandemic. Whatever it is, we have to sell. And there is what we believe, not only with our tool that is probably really the best tool out there in the world, it is more, not the tool, it's the mindset that we are trying to really to embed in the people. And what is it? It is the change of bringing a new being for salespeople. Because what salespeople are, they are truly, really wealth creator. What we need to do, we have to create, again, wealth, and they're a peace producer. And guys, we need peace in this world more than anything else. Nothing is more needed. Yeah? And so I am immediately jumping right now into the event, and let's hear from our experts. And so, Marcia, I think it's amazing, your history and everything. You have really an expert in that area. And so I'm asking you to prepare, to embrace any kind of change in your life or in business. How do you become emotionally aware? How you do that?
You know, Nicholas, you're so right that you want to focus on your emotions, because your emotions will either impel you and inspire you to change, or will stop you, based on fear, based on doubt. So it is important to be aware. I think the main thing is to understand that emotions are biological first. For years, we practiced the mantra, change your thoughts, you change your behavior. And now we know that's just not true. Although a lot of people say, oh, it's about self-talk. But the problem is that the more intense the emotion, the less your self-talk's going to work. I mean, if you're driving your car and you're late to a meeting and there's traffic and you say, oh, don't be impatient. Well, that doesn't last. So we have to identify where in our body we feel emotions. And the quicker you can identify an emotional hit, the quicker you can shift it. So, where do you feel frustration or irritation? Is it in your stomach? Is it your chest, the back of your neck? Where do you feel fear? And we feel it in different places. So I can't tell you where you feel it. You have to identify it for yourself. And the quicker you can feel like, oh, there's fear, the quicker you can choose, what is it I want to feel instead? Do I want to feel courage? Do I want to feel calm? So you make your emotional choice. And once you shift your emotion, then it will naturally shift your thoughts, which then shift your behavior. So we become emotionally aware by noticing when we have emotions, either in the moment, oh, I'm having an emotion. And the other exercise I have people do is to 2-3 times a day, set your phone to go off and just stop and say, what am I feeling? Where is it showing up in my body? Why am I feeling that way? And that will start to wire your brain to be more emotionally aware so you can catch it in the moment and shift it to better serve you and achieve the goals you want.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Fantastic, Marcia. So building on that, Michael, so how do you then actually build the structure for change for both yourself and perhaps for those you're leading?
Yeah, thanks for asking, John. There are a number of practices and philosophies that cross over from change at the individual level to change at the organizational level. And interestingly, when we think about building the structure for change, I think the important question is, how do we build a culture for change, right? Both individually and organizationally. And to make that even more confusing, there's a great quote which says, "Culture follows structure," which is Larman's law. And essentially all that means is that the structures, the principles, the activities, the expectations that we have in place, you can apply this to the individual and the organizational level, impact the culture that we have. And so structure at the organizational level includes everything from hiring practices to developmental paths for the employee to consequences and accountabilities, to values being operationalized. And you could think about these things at the individual level as well. And so I want to give as a clear kind of call to action 3 practices that could benefit an organization and 3 practices that could benefit the individual when you think about building structure for change. And so the practice at the organizational level that we've seen, one that work really well, is instituting more feedback loops. And all that is instituting more requests for feedback, instituting, some coaching perhaps at the leadership level, utilizing assessment tools for individuals, leaders, employees. And so feedback loops is a great tool for the organization. In addition to that, you can think about coaching as a tool, improving coaching skills at the individual, the leadership level. We've seen that be a great practice for organizations. And then thirdly, at the organizational level, as it impacts change, is creating more transparency. And so we know that more transparent cultures often yield higher performance. Transparency is a marker of psychological safety, which we know is a predictor for high-performing groups of people. Right? So having transparent culture is a really great thing for organization. At the individual level, 3 tips for that would be, again, creating more feedback loops. You can do that through requests, through assessments, instituting better self-care practices. And all that means is having a routine daily that will help us manage stress, a physical routine, a reflective routine, understanding our good nutrition practices. And then lastly, the third thing I would say, John, at the individual level for managing change is don't get tunnel vision around changing one aspect of our lived experience. As Marcia said, there is an influence from our emotions, our thoughts, and our behaviors. And sometimes we can get tunnel vision into one versus the other. And so the invitation there is to be considerate of all aspects of our lived experience, our environment, our emotions, our thought patterns, our behaviors, etc.
Yeah, no, can I one more question to that? Because you see, Peter Drucker, because you said very deliberately or explicit, or he said culture eats strategy for breakfast, as you know. And so or sometimes culture it's written words, but how you really embed that deeper in that area in a company, because right now so many people have really anxiety, fears, doubt, or there is so much going on right now in many companies, or I maybe fired or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say to that, sometimes the opportunity that companies have is that, there is sometimes a misconception that if we have our values and our mission statement and our roles and aspirations in place, that's enough. But oftentimes what we see is that those words may be in place, but the operationalizing of those words is not in place. So you could say that we have the language, but we don't have the spirit. We don't have the action behind it. And without the action behind those words, there really isn't any real value. And so that would be an invitation for really any company, small or large, is to assess how their values are being operationalized on a daily basis.
Yeah, that leads me immediately to Rachel. That's perfect, because Rachel, I think right now, the question for you is really, where you're an expert in that area, is fear plays a big role in preventing often change. The fear of failure, I had that a lot. And also sometimes is even the fear of success. So how do you overcome these fears?
Yes, in my presentations, my brand is Magnificent Resilience, and I call fear the kryptonite of resilience, and the antidote is courage. And my definition of courage is the acquired ability to move beyond fear. And I emphasize acquired ability because some people have the impression they just aren't bold, they're timid, there's nothing they can do about that. And that's simply not true. While it is true, some people are naturally just born with a temperament that's more bold. There's a lot you can do to modify your behavior and grow if you're committed to the process. And if you want to be resilient, that's absolutely necessary. I also talk about my presentations, much like what you referenced. I talk about some of the core fears, the fear of failure and the fear of success, but also the fear of rejection and abandonment, and the fear of inadequacy. I think there was a book called The Imposter Syndrome, where people just get the impression that they're not good enough. But what they don't realize is that they're judging their insides by other people's outsides, and they're not aware that most people, even the most successful, have their moments of self-doubt, and that does not need to stop you. And I referenced the very world famous late psychologist Albert Ellis, who talked about the importance of self-acceptance versus self-esteem. And what that definition was is that you accept yourself, whether you're succeeding or whether you're failing, your good points, your bad points, the good, bad, and the ugly. And through that, you can lay to rest your ego and not be thwarted in your ability to take those healthy risks that are going to make you successful. Because the reality is that most people who have impressive resumes, obviously one of the most famous examples is Abraham Lincoln, there is failure that goes with that. And I remember the story of the billionaire who founded Spanx. She told the story of her father, how every day when she would come home from school, he would ask her to recount what didn't go right, her failures. And through that, he obviously had a conscious awareness that he broke her of that fear, and it paid off in dividends. And, so many people are just held back. Also, by that fear of rejection, that's one of the most core fears, fear of abandonment from the group. And I must admit that that is a huge fear that I've had to acquire, to overcome. And the reality is, if you're going to be a leader, that's the opportunity cost involved, that, kind of picture the eagle that's soaring above, that doesn't necessarily have the group around them. But that's just the nature of what it means to be exceptional. And like I said, the downside of that, we all have an upside and a downside to everything you're going to do in life. And likewise, the cost of being mediocre and fitting into the group is you most likely will miss out on your destiny and your opportunity to have a major impact on so many lives. And I just love that quote from Einstein. He said, great spirits have always had to encounter violent opposition from mediocre minds. So that's just par for the course, you know. I remember going to a speaking seminar, and Florence Littauer, this very famous speaker, said, as soon as you stand up, there'll be a line of people, as long as you can see, trying to get you to sit down, because they don't want to be in the position you're in. They don't want to take those costs and those risks required, but you remind them of that failure within them to step out and burn the candle, the midnight oil, to do something amazing. And so there's just something subconscious that makes them want to, get you to lose your focus and your destiny through that fear of failure. But you have to press through that. You have to acquire that courage to understand the prize is so much greater. And that's your destiny and your success and your significance. And, that's what I think are some of the requirements to overcome those fears. We could write a dissertation about it.
Yeah, I know that's fantastic. That's fantastic, Rachel. And I'm so glad you mentioned the imposter syndrome, because I think that's one of the biggest ones that people don't realize. Even when they get the courage to stand up and speak, they suddenly then go, oh, but why would anybody listen to me? Why would, I'm not that good, or I don't have that much experience, and then they sabotage themselves. Marcia, one of the things, right, you can embrace change and you can decide to move ahead with change, but there's always like obstacles on the road to enduring change, as we know. Mm-hmm. How can you anticipate and maybe overcome some of those obstacles?
Well, John, there are external obstacles as well as internal. And interesting about external is we often fool ourselves. I think it was Carl Sagan said, the more emotions there are, the more likely we are to fool ourselves. This year has taught us that there's nothing that we know for sure. We can't predict tomorrow. Now, we've always known that. We've taught leaders embrace ambiguity and, hoping that they'll understand that there's nothing for sure that we know. But now we know it. And so I think that to understand what's real and how we fool ourselves is really important. There's a number of things that really stop us. The major obstacles are our own emotional triggers. And the two biggest ones are the feeling I have no control over this situation, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, the uncertainty. There's additional ones going on right now. I've been hearing a lot lately about being, those of us stuck at home, that we have this great need for privacy. And it's really irritating us that we don't have that. And then we all have our own emotional triggers, our needs for appreciation, recognition, freedom. As Michael said, it's really important to work with a coach to help you identify what your blocks are, because it's hard for us to see them ourselves, especially when we have emotions. So if we can identify what triggers us, what gets in our way, what stops us, then every morning we should have a moment where we stop and set our intention for the day. How is it I want to feel today? Like Rachel said, courage is really important. Do I want to feel courageous? And set that intention. For me, it's gratitude. What it is I'm grateful for helps center me and get me grounded. It could be patience with myself and with others. So how do I set my emotional intention for the day and then notice during the day as I'm falling out of that? So what I talked about before about noticing my emotional triggers that will take me out of the moment so I can come back to what it is I want to feel. And I like what Rachel said about, we have to notice these things and just accept they exist and then move on. So I'd like to end this with my favorite quote that's up here on my wall by Audre Lorde, who's an activist. And she talked about the importance of having vision and purpose. So in the morning, not only setting your emotional intention, but remembering what's most important and what do you want to create. She said, when I remember to act in the service of my vision, it's no longer important that which I'm afraid. So set your intention, your emotional intention, remember your purpose, your vision, and what you want to create, and it will help you overcome those obstacles that you face every day.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good bridge to immediately to Michael, because you see, we all know right now we need to create change on a personal level, on a business level. I would even go beyond on their society level, state. Yeah, we need change. It's obvious right now. Yeah. The question is, what role plays intuition and emotional intelligence? What is the driver on that? What you would say, Michael?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really appreciate both what Rachel and Marcia shared. Rachel talks about, beware of the ego. I wrote that down. I really think that applies to both emotional intelligence and intuition, as does our triggers, which Marcia talked about. We're always managing these triggers. And so the question that I ask is, when it relates to an intuition, is our intuition actually a fear, a trigger, or is it actually something beneficial that we should be following along? And emotional intelligence, I think, can be a path toward improving intuition, right? And so there are typically 4 markers within the context of emotional intelligence, and they are self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. So my awareness of myself and others, and my ability to manage self and others, right? And if we think about developing those 4, they could be paths to developing our intuition. Both, of course, can help us with managing change. And so I wanted to I'll give you 4 strategies, one for each of the elements of emotional intelligence, and then tie that into intuition. And so the first one, self-awareness. Self-awareness is all about understanding our beliefs, our values, our behaviors, our thought patterns, right? And the reality is that these things that are going on are either helping us manage change or disrupting our ability to manage change. And so to determine if I'm being helpful or hurtful with my own patterning, my own awareness, I really see a lot of value in the clients that we work with utilizing a term called tracking for congruency, which is essentially, tracking everything I just mentioned, the thoughts, the values, the behaviors, and really determining, are these things helping me manage change, or are they creating obstacles for me? So this is a way to improve our self-awareness. And it can also, again, be a path to improve our ability to recognize, is this an intuition that I'm having, or am I responding to a trigger or to my ego, like Rachel and Marcia shared, right? So number 2 is social awareness. And so the idea here behind social awareness is it's essentially, the ability to understand others, the ability to differentiate between myself and someone else, the ability to understand, is this my own intuition or am I picking up someone else's idea, right? And so the practice here, I think, the practice that people could implement right away is getting better at asking questions. And this might sound like a simple skill set, but the skill of asking questions is I think, really one that can propel us forward in a lot of ways, both in managing change and creating success. And I want to give you 2 books that we'll often reference to clients. One is called The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay-Steiner, and then the second one is called The Mindful Coach by Doug Silsby. These are excellent resources to build that capacity of question asking. So that's resource number 2. And then number 3 on the emotional intelligence, the self-management, which is one of the quadrants of EQ. This is all about managing behavior, managing my own patterns in action, not in thought. And again, the opportunity here is to track for congruency, track the behaviors that I'm doing on a daily, weekly basis, and asking the question, are they congruent with the change I'm trying to make? Or are these behaviors creating disruptions, creating my own hurdles for myself? Right? And then finally, lastly, relationship management is the 4th quadrant in EQ. And the way to develop this, the way to enhance it, is to, again, I mentioned this on the last question, but to get more feedback, to ask more questions. And I think that an additional challenge for folks that are challenged with relationship management, another opportunity for them is to hone into the process versus the outcome. And so those of us that are challenged with relationship management often lean into the outcome in a big way, lean into the deliverable or to whatever's going to happen at the finish line, and don't put enough value on the relationship or the process itself. And so that can be another opportunity. And again, these emotional intelligence markers, these 4, obviously, these practices will impact our ability to improve EQ, but they also impact our ability to improve our own intuition, both of which enhance our ability to manage change.
I like the one of the self-management very much, because you see, we in our company always say, if you not learn to self-manage, because some people come in the company and they want to be manager, yeah. But you see, if you cannot learn to self-manage, and before you are manage other people, you have to learn to manage, let's say, the customer quite well. Then maybe the people they are leading you, yeah, and then your cohorts, yeah, and if there is no emotional intelligence, when you are not immediately rushing and speak to other people, how you can really learn? You see, you can see before you just say, I want to be a manager. Yeah. You have to learn by yourself. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a great question.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And yeah, the self-management piece, it's the one that people tend to overlook a little bit as they get so focused on managing other people. So Rachel, one of the things is, let's face it, belief systems, play a huge role in shaping our lives, both personally and professionally. And so how can you overcome any ingrained belief system or systems that may actually be holding you back?
Rachel.
Sorry, Rachel, you're muted still. I'm trying to unmute yourself. There we go.
Apologize. I think we can learn from neuroscience and what we've learned about neuroplasticity, that we can literally reroute our neural pathways. And I liken it to, especially if you kind of come, as I did, from kind of some people who were broken and had a lot of negative mindsets, those beliefs can kind of become ingrained like trenches, because they've been going so many years. It's like a brainwashing that's taken place. And even though if you're challenging it consciously, because there's so much in there on the subconscious level, it's difficult. So when you start going towards those negative beliefs and kind of drilling in to try to change them, it's more like footpaths. Now you're starting, but it's going to take time for that neuroplasticity to take effect. And that's the reason you have to go at it from multiple directions. I highly recommend the book by Bessel van der Kolk. He's a Russian psychiatrist who wrote one of the best books on trauma called The Body Keeps the Score. And that's what he talks about with trauma. He's dealt with anyone from Vietnam veterans to children, now adult survivors of the Catholic abuse scandal and every kind of trauma in between. And he talks about how you have to, deal with it. As Marcia was saying, you have to look at your intention and your emotion. You also have to look at your beliefs. You have to get into your body. A lot of people who've experienced some very negative mindsets, they're kind of stuck in their head. So even through exercise and through dance and through movement, you're pushing out that emotion. Another modality that I found incredibly useful in this process of transforming mindset is EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And it's a fabulous technique. And Francine Shapiro, who came up with the technique purely through serendipity, found that, she can only theorize, but the research supports this, that trauma and negative beliefs often are stored in a different part of the brain, kind of like the midbrain. And through EMDR, which is a process of stimulating both the left and right hemispheres of the brain as you process traumatic experiences, the theory is that now you've integrated that experience more into the frontal lobe, the cerebrum, the conscious mind. And so it transforms your mindset about the experience. And what a lot of people who've been traumatized, and I can liken this to my own experience, would say, I know this, but I feel that. And after EMDR, and sometimes just a few sessions, you don't feel that anymore. You're able to integrate and understand and not be stuck in that polarization of what you think and what you feel. And through that process, it allows you to detach from that experience. And it's like closing a chapter of a book, finally, closure, and opening a new chapter where you can develop those footpaths and make them trenches. So those are some ideas I would have.
Wow.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's powerful stuff. And thank you to all three of you as we come to an end of this first group. There's so much to unpack, and I'm even just looking at the chat on live on YouTube and on Twitter, and there's so many comments coming through from people who really appreciated your insights and are adding their own. So this was extremely powerful. So again, thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Michael. We're going to switch over to our other group in a moment, but before we do, we just have a quick note from our sponsor, which is Pipeliner CRM. So I'm just going to play this and then we'll switch over.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for John for bringing our advertising piece also in. But one thing I have to mention immediately is we have in our last release in the product, we brought in Sales Pop. We are the only application right now in the world that have content embedded, intelligent content embedded in the application on a daily basis. You get the experts in everything because we believe in change and we want really a new being for salespeople. That leads me right now to Sharon. Sharon, my question is right now, our life experience play a big role in influencing our choices, as we know, yeah, and how we can let go of this, but every one of us has negative experience, and to allow really to embrace the positive change. How we do that?
Oh, that's such a good question. And it's deep and it's hard work. So for myself as a trauma survivor and being diagnosed with PTSD because of all the trauma that I went through over actually several decades, there were patterns of belief about myself. So the work that I do includes really helping people understand that either what you have done or what has been done to you doesn't define who you are, and that you do have the ability to completely change those patterns. Like your other speakers were talking about, is rewiring your brain. But it starts with some really, really basic steps. And that's understanding, first of all, that you do have the power to choose. So many people that have suffered start to feel powerless. They feel like they have no control. And quite often, if you've grown up with some type of abuse or even have had some type of a traumatic incident, you feel like your control has been taken away from you. So we either end up one of two ways. We become control freaks, or we become so small and powerless that we just aren't aware of what we can do. So the first step really is realizing that you do have the power to choose. And then in that choice, who do you want to be? And with my clients, I say, if you want to be whatever it is, fill in the blank, write down what would that look like to you? And we start creating a workbook so that you can start to develop what would that look like for me? What would it look like for me to let go of some of these things and to be stronger and to take my power back, to start using my voice? And we just kind of start from that type of a point. And then one thing that's really, really helpful, if you really want to nail down the patterns in your life, is you create a timeline of your life. And on that timeline, you can put the markers in of by year, this is what happened and this is what happened. And then also develop what was the story I told myself about this. Say a parent left when you were a small child. A small child could think, well, that happened to have happened around the time that I brought home a bad report card. So daddy left because I'm not a good student. Suddenly the story is, I must be the best student in order to get daddy back. And then we start associating self-worth becomes all about that academics. And everybody wears a mask. Let's just face it. Men and women, we all wear a mask and we take on a persona to survive the things in life. So if you look at it that way, you can see how easy it is to put that mask, that academic mask on, and then your whole self-worth revolves around it. And then when you don't get into UCLA or some other esteemed university, it's the world is over, I'm not good enough, and it's more of the story, when it really has absolutely nothing to do with you, your self-worth as a human, the value that you bring to the world. But it's super, super powerful. I see this all the time. People get caught in the story that they associate with another event that's happened in their life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Sharon. And it's amazing how much of this we do inflict upon ourselves. Brad, as someone who is serving as a counselor and a pastor at this time, what do you see as some of the processes that can better serve people during this period?
Well, thank you, John and Nicholas, for the privilege to join in this. Really enjoyed, I must say, the first seminar too. One of the best things I've come across. So in my position, I've been looking at people being in this season of life and how unusual it is, and trying to ponder what it is that they have to face. And I see that everyone's faced with this challenge to embrace the call that change brings. They know that life has changed, and I think they're trying to sort out, how can I engage it? And I think if we realize that a lot of people just fundamentally don't like change, that can be in part due to personality. Everybody can tell you whether they're one who likes change or doesn't like change. Majority of people aren't really given to change. And one of the things that's striking to me is that part of that can be related to age. I think that people who are older have been in the last decade of what people have said is exponential change. Technology and things has people almost mildly traumatized or feeling very intimidated, fundamentally intimidated by the level of change. So many people who are over the age of 50 right now have already been feeling challenged that they're going to be left behind. And so I think you have that starting point of people facing this time, and you reach a point in which I think in the kind of, we'll say, the pandemic change of the current moment, that a lot of people have kind of pulled the car over to the side of the road and put it in park. And they've kind of been glancing in the rearview mirror, because that's what happens when we feel like what's ahead of us is hard to see, whether by just too much change or this kind of halted time. We begin to put the car in neutral, maybe into park, look in the rearview mirror. And the challenge is to realize that I have to come to that point in which life is in front of me. Everything is ultimately in front of me, and I choose this larger windshield, and there's a reason why it's larger, and I look forward and embrace it. And I'll just mention briefly, obviously can't unpack what I think that change in that process means. The first is, I think the process of change finds freedom through confronting that fear. As one of the previous speakers said, it's like the kryptonite, if you will. I think that we underestimate how much fear really does control us. And a large part of that is because fear has a way of claiming something bigger than it is. And so we become overwhelmed by it. And if you feel like, if I face it, I'm going to be overwhelmed, you're going to keep it pressed down. And I think that one of the ways that we really gain power and get power back is by facing our fears. And much of our energy in life is avoiding those fears. But I've been seeing this more and more in people, and even anxiety attacks can come from this almost undefined fear. And sometimes if we begin to dare to ask, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? What is it I'm really afraid of? And we kind of go down the road of worst case scenarios. We find that nothing is as big as it seems.
Mhm.
And when we start to do that, we start to kind of gain back, if you will, what it is. And so, or the ability to confront things. We take back control. The second thing is the process of change finds traction and recognizing that we're still ultimately rooted in order and not in chaos. And I think this is really significant. And this, many people have spoken about, the other speakers, about how one might want to wake up and give some reflection upon life. And I think this is a big part of it. We need to recognize that change is not the same as chaos. And if you think about Western civilization and what has brought about wealth and business and the ability to grow and expand in the way that we have, a huge part of that is recognizing that there is order in the world. It's the belief and the recognition of order over chaos that allows people to have something to trust in, and therefore something to invest in, and the ability to make choices. And so when we feel like everything's changing, we tend to think everything's in chaos. If we step back, we start to realize that actually order still does really rule the world. Every one of us got up this morning and made a number of choices. Even the fact that we got up was because we believe there's still time. And all of those functions are what people can still trust in. So in my role, in terms of spiritual life, it's valuable for me to encourage people that in the midst of all the changing, see and root yourself in what's unchanging. And that much of our Western civilization, again, is built on the fact that we kind of came out of the medieval ages when the belief was that the Roman pagan gods were just these capricious gods, and they really ordered the world, and you couldn't trust anything. Everything seemed just random. And it was coming out of that and saying, no, it appears that there is a God who created the world with order that began to create Western civilization in many regards. And that's why I encourage people to look at that and look deeply into that and begin to see that there are many things that are really the same. And so, for instance, in business, I think of the need for people to realize that much of what you hope to encourage people to make choices to do, including buying things, is built on the fact that things still do exist. There's still time. And so therefore, if you want to sell me a watch, I believe that I still need a watch tomorrow. Now, I might not be as secure in my income, so I might not want to buy as nice a watch because that's something I'm not so certain of, but I am pretty certain there's going to be time. And so all that to say that I think we need to really focus on rooting ourselves in and finding traction by looking at the unchanging. And the last thing I'll mention is I think that the process of change can find peace as we let go of what I call the false power of control and embrace the true power of influence. As we, I think, all know, the control is like the grand illusion in human life, and we actually don't have control or ultimate control of really anything. And most of us want to, and we try to. And when we feel less control, like we might in this season, we're going to usually grasp for more of it. And parents face this dilemma with teenagers. They tend to fight for control that they don't have. And what we find is that as we begin to let go of control, it's only then that we can embrace what we do have, and that's influence.
Yeah, I think the illusion of change is a very powerful one, I think. Yeah. Let's see. Nicholas, I think you have a question for Eileen.
Yeah, I just follow up one thought with Brett before I immediately jump to Eileen for her question. But the point is, that is so funny for me. the control and the influence, because you see, I'm right now over 2 years away from our developers in Bratislava. 2 years. I was traveling over the last 8 years since I moved from Austria to build the company in America 4 times a year to be with my people. And it was a giving up every time a little bit more on control, every time a little bit more. And I realized the only thing that I have right now is influencing people. And interesting is John and I do on a regular basis a video chat with them, a video message. And what is it? It's, I cannot control when they come, how they come, and are they sitting, the productivity, how good they program. I can only influence their mind because they are knowledge workers. And right now they do better. I'm not saying since I'm gone, yeah, but they do better and they're more productive because they are influenced by a higher purpose. And so control is absolutely the wrong approach for the future. And I think there is a big line between, we can speak about it, but Peter Drucker was saying that you cannot measure, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Is measuring controlling? I would say no, but this is a different topic for another. Eileen. So,
yes, Nicholas.
so it needs, for all of that, what we're talking, a lot of energy to do that. Yeah, this energy, where is that coming from? How I can feel that? Yeah, where is that? Do I have a gas station inside, or where's the gas station coming from?
All right. Well, thank you very much for the question. First off, I think the greatest renewable resource, energy resource, is human energy. But let me backtrack where energy actually comes from and what it is. So many of us remember from our old science books that energy is the capacity to do work. No energy, no work. But let's talk about that. To me, energy is the basis of resilience, of being able to grow through change. And that's not just negative change. I think sometimes because of the situation we're in, we're going, oh my God, this is terrible, this is terrible. But it's also to grow through opportunity. And I'm going to come back to that for a minute. But if you think about energy, Nicholas, you think about a power grid. Energy starts in one place. If the power grid is connected well, the energy goes through and the lights go on. You turn an ignition in a car, it's a good connection, hits the battery, car moves forward. Bad connection, the car doesn't move. Bad connection, the lights don't go on. So first and foremost, to me, energy is all about looking where are the right ways in which we create connections. And are they connections that are positive connections, or are they connections that deplete this human battery? So I think that's one of the things that's really important to me, that resilience is about energy management. So if I think about this notion of creating connections, and I was fascinated by what you said about how you were going to Bratislava all this time, and you were connecting and feeling that you had some control over what was happening. What you have done is, by stepping back, you have allowed your team to create their own energy of purpose, and knowing that I don't have to have somebody hanging over me telling me what to do. So when I think about this notion of energy then and connection, and this is what the speakers have said before me, is first off, how do we connect with our head? What is it that I say to myself? And people have talked about, how we have this negative self-talk. I'm going to suggest something very simple. I think a lot comes from the words that we say to ourselves. And I will suggest even the words we say out loud. Sharon, you use this word when you talked about how do we have the power of choice. I have given this an assignment to a number of clients. I said, every time I hear you say, every time you start to say, well, I have to, stop. I'm choosing to. No, it's a choice.
It's a choice.
We always have more than two options. It's called requisite variety. In the area of biology, we know that the organism with the greatest number of responses to any given situation is the one that survives, not the strongest, the one that can find multiple ways. So I like to push back and say, so give me another choice. Give me another choice. You might not care for all those choices, but when you begin to say, okay, yeah, I am choosing this. And so when I realized that there is power that rests in me, it begins with language. I think one of the first virtual programs I did when this whole pandemic and lockdown happened was with global destination managers from around the world. And they were talking about social distancing. I'm saying, wrong. That's the wrong word. It's not social distancing. It's
Correct.
physical distancing.
Yes,
What we
absolutely.
yearn for is personal connection.
Yeah.
And that's why, like what we're doing right now, in some ways, there are opportunities that are presenting themselves right now that we're not even aware of. And I'd like to say that one of the ways we make connections is to begin to say, what is possible that we see here? And we are seeing some amazing, amazing adaptations of organizations, of people that I never thought about this. Well, let's try it this way. Well, let's try it this way. In fact, now I want to be very cognizant because I know we have a time frame. Do I have time to tell you a very short story?
Yeah, sure. Quick, go for it.
Real quick. Okay. And actually it comes from 1850. In 1850, a massive storm swept across England, destroyed 5 ships went down, all hands aboard, an Irish passenger ship went down. And 2 days later, on the island of Orkney, off the coast of Scotland, when the villagers went out, the storm was so violent that it ripped away the topsoil. And what the villagers saw when they looked down was a village. They saw 7 houses. The little point of land is called Scarabray. Those houses are older than Stonehenge, older than the Great Pyramids, but they didn't know it existed. I'd like to suggest to you that what we're experiencing right now, the topsoil has been torn away. And what we now are looking at things that maybe we didn't want to see before. Maybe we've been doing some really stupid things. You know, we haven't looked at our healthcare. We haven't looked at social injustice. Now we have an opportunity. And in that opportunity is to choose, how do I reframe what's happening so that I can get energy for possibilities?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great, Eileen. You made me want to break out some scotch there for a moment.
It's too early, John. No, I don't know.
Hey, it's never too early. Anyway, Sharon, so building on this, which is a great segue, when you want to sustain change, you know, how much does belief play a part? And how do you increase your own self-belief and your own self-confidence?
Well, okay. I'm gonna say this twice because I think this is really, really profound. Believing a lie is just as powerful as believing the truth. Believing a lie is just as powerful as believing the truth. So just to connect with what Eileen was just sharing about those choices, when somebody starts saying, I have to. So often that is that pattern of belief. It's the lie that I have to. I have to make sure that dinner is on the table at 6 o'clock. Okay, well, why do you have to do that? Because he'll be mad if I don't. So we can get into these weird patterns of what we're believing, and we think that there isn't any wiggle room to have a different choice. So she is absolutely right in that. What you believe about yourself is absolutely paramount. And what you believe about the world around you is paramount. It really takes the stopping and saying, look at that timeline that I talked about making just a moment ago, and saying, what is the belief that's been going on through my whole life? And you've got to take it apart. And it's hard work. You need somebody in your life that you can bounce that off of, because sometimes it's a little hard to figure out what is really true about me when things are so deeply ingrained. And you need a sounding board that's going to speak truth back into you and actually call you out a little bit gently sometimes to say, is that really true about you? What other choice do you have? So that you do start taking your power back and you do start seeing that I have options. There's other ways that I can do this. There's other ways that I can get to the goals and the dreams that I have about my life. Like the things that are going on right now in the world, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Like others have mentioned, it's time to reflect because this is going to end, and let's be better when we emerge from all of this. So I think this is a season to hunker down and do that work And when you come out stronger and better, and with a completely new outlook on life and a new plan for your life.
Yeah. So Brad, when you are connecting daily with a lot of people as a counselor and pastor, and what else do you see in challenges people maybe have in, it's really an unusual time. We have to acknowledge that and it happens around the world as never before in the history. So we're facing these challenges, and what else do you see from your perspective? Are you on mute, or you have to unmute you? Yeah, here we go.
I think throughout the season, I've been struck by the fact that having kind of pastored a community in Los Angeles through the 92 LA riots, the 94 earthquake, the events of 9/11, I've been really struck by how there is something that feels different in this, and trying to recognize that I think more than ever, people have a hard time even telling you exactly what they're feeling inside, how it's different. If there's any words that seem to dominate, it's not necessarily just loss or shock, but unsettledness and uncertainty, I think, are enormous. It's different than any other time because usually there's a single event that created change. We could define the change. It was all about coming out of that. But in many ways right now, people are feeling the unsettledness because we're in change. We can't tell the when and the what as much as in the past. So with that in mind, I think that it's really important to relate to people in those feelings. And I think one of the things that can be helpful to people is beginning to at least define the likelihood of stages. There's a certain adaptability that we all do have, and we're going to have to tap into it. I think that's what's so good about this event, is helping people to think about that adaptability. And part of that may be kind of considering that this is it's proving to be longer, and I think that's throwing people off. But maybe considering that 2020 is kind of a temporary season now. Perhaps the first quarter of 2021 is a bridge season, and then into the next season. That might have to be shifted in terms of expectations, but it can deeply help people to begin to define things so they don't feel they're living in this kind of endless halt or holding pattern, and people can begin to define this is what it's going to involve. I think another element that strikes me is that we talk a lot about innovation, and you guys are just really leading the way and people thinking that way. I do get concerned that sometimes not everybody is going to be able to innovate the grand thing that changes the world and makes everything better. The truth is, not everything is necessarily going to be better, and we might do well to affirm not just innovation, because not everybody, again, will have that, but adaptability. A lot of what my team has done, I'm so proud of what they've done, and they've innovated, but their adaptability is something to itself maybe affirm and call out. And I think that's a valuable thing. And lastly, I think a lot of people are going to be navigating change of pace. I've had people even this week tell me, you know, as hard as everything is, it's nice to have less commute, and it's nice to have more time with family. How do we come out of that? That's going to be challenging for people. I think we have to be prepared to help people find their way through what even emerging back into the frenzies like. So those are just some of the things I think are a little unique about this season.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and I think there'll be a lot of reconfiguration of how people live their lives, work, reconfiguration of organizations, etc. So, and it's a great segue too into Eileen. So, let's bring it home with some good practices that will help you support change in the long run.
Thank you. Well, we're going to use energy. That's what we're talking about, is how do we move through this? And I said it was connection. So first we talked about your head, but it's also your heart. You know, this is an incredible energy field, stronger than the brain. We know that this is the little brain right here. So how are you connecting with people who matter to you? It gives you energy when I connect with people who matter for me. And you know what's interesting is walking around my neighborhood. Because I work. I'm not out walking around my neighborhood. I am now. I'm seeing people. I'm smiling at people. I helped some lady with her oxygen tent. You know, you all of a sudden, when you even connect that way, it you feel part of that connection, part of that human race. And of course, there's our whole physical body. This morning, I got up and ran 5 miles because I'm in a location where I can't. But without that, my brain doesn't work. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to go run 5 miles, but how do we take care of this body? Because this is the engine that drives the locomotive. So part of the whole energy thing is my exercise, my diet, my sleep. Oh, that's one of the amazing things right now where we are. I'm actually sleeping 7 and 8 hours a night. Oh my God, that never happened. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
It's cute.
Now we have to laugh. I have a friend who says it's not a pandemic, it's a pound-demic. We're just eating all the dark chocolate that we can. But that the ways in which we respond to that refuels our energy. Let me suggest 2 other things. One is this, my cousin sent me this the other day. It was a text message and she said, I want to read it. She said, I'm thankful for my struggle because it helped me stumble over my strength. And I think at the end of the day, Marcia talked about waking up with gratitude, which is a great practice, going to bed at night with gratitude. We have so much to be grateful for. And it's sometimes that I actually even have the air to breathe. But the other thing I think that can refuel our energy is if we live where we are. In other words, in the now. We live either in the past, oh, I want it the way it was, or, oh my God, what's going to happen over there? Our only place is the now. I actually, in my book that's coming out in August 4th, I have a poem in there that I wrote called In the Now. How do we stay right here? This is all I have. This is the only place of power that I have. And so how wonderful that now I get to listen to all my fellow speakers, John and Nicholas, that you have made this, because now is what matters. Now, this is where I get my energy from. And I get my energy by saying, what do I do that's of contribution today?
That's superb, Eileen. And I think it was James Joyce, the Irish writer, said that most people live at arm's length from themselves because they're not living in the now. Well, listen, this has been fantastic. Nicholas, if you'd like to say a few words before we wrap up for today.
Yes. So first of all, thank you to all of you. We highly appreciate that. We strongly believe we are in a change, and we are changing our sales. We're changing sales, guys, in a way that is probably from a negative connotation, because salespeople mainly are experienced as people that are greedy, they are pushy, they are not positive. And this workforce could be the game changer. This is what I strongly, and we from Pipeliner believe, for the future. Why? Because sales has to have empathy. Sales have to have in the future win to win. Sales has to have what Michael said, emotional intelligence. Sales has to have take away the mask, what Sharon was saying. And I think maybe this is a picture that we can all see. We are wearing right now when we go out, mask. And in California, we have a lockdown again, so we have to wear any, right? Yeah. But maybe this is a picture that what Sharon said, we all wear masks. Maybe when we take the mask finally away, when we can shine to our really identity, our own identity, because we breathe that. We are really experience that. And salespeople could be so instrumentally to bring wealth, what we have to create again, and bring peace to the world. Because if I punch you guys into the face, you would not buy anything with me. Yeah. But if isn't that true? Yeah. So we need to bridge and help us to build that, to change sales. And this is what I strongly believe. The most undereducated, underdeveloped, underappreciated workforce in the world could be the game changer for building a new world.
Yes, thank you.
John, can I add something?
Yes, please go ahead, Eileen. Yes.
Because you said this thing about the mask, when we take the mask off. What we now look at are people's eyes. The eyes are the windows of the soul.
It's true.
If I'm in sales, I don't want to just look at your mouth. I want to look at your eyes. And so maybe this lets me look deeper at you.
Nice.
That's perfect. Yeah, maybe we should just wear masks forever. I'm only joking.
Yeah.
I did. As somebody who had to make an emergency flight overseas and ended up in a mask for 16 hours, I wouldn't recommend permanent masks to anybody. Listen, I just want to say thank you again to Marcia Reynolds, who's president of Co-Visioning, Rachel Cipriano, CEO of Magnificent Resilience, Sharon Hughes, who's the author of The Girl in the Garage, Michael Diettrich-Chastain, author of A Great Book Changes, Eileen McDargh, CEO of the Resiliency Group, and Brad Bailey, pastor and family and marriage therapist. Listen, I think the amount of wisdom that is being shared in the last hour or so is almost overwhelming. That's why I would really encourage everybody, when this recording will be available immediately, please share it far and wide, because I think there's so many great insights here, and not just for today, but insights that will endure for a long, long time to come. And as we said, change is something that everybody struggles with on one level or another. And I think all of you have been so kind today in sharing your wisdom and insight, and I think you'll help a lot of people. So from myself, I'd like to say thank you. And we will wrap up today's event and look out for another event in the Thrive and Prosper series coming very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.